Welcome to the And She Looked Up Creative Hour podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Hartfield, and I'm an artist and an entrepreneur. And yes, those two things can go together. This podcast is for the artists, the creatives, and the makers who want to find a way to make a living doing what they love. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the And She Looked Up podcast. As always, I am your host, Melissa, and this week I am really excited because I am welcoming my first photographer to the podcast. My guest this week is Halifax-based dance photographer Rachael Dyer. Welcome to the show, Rachael.
Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here and feel very humbled to be the first photographer on your podcast. No pressure.
No pressure. No pressure. So Rachael, let's get to know Rachael a little bit more before we dive into what we're talking about today. And today we are actually going to be talking about finding your niche, and dance photography is a very subset of photography, and it's and it's an interesting niche, but it's one that Rachael is doing extremely well with, and so I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about niching down your business. But before we do that, let's get to know Rachael a little better. Rachael, and you may know her online as Movita Beaucoup, which has been her longtime pseudonym on the internet, is a dance photographer living in Halifax, Nova Scotia. She is a graduate of the teacher training program at Canada's National Ballet School and taught ballet in Toronto and throughout the Maritimes for almost 30 years. She has been photographing dancers since 2016, and she officially launched her photography business in 2019. When she's not taking photos, Rachael dabbles in freelance writing and has been putting stories on the internet since 2007. And that is actually how I first came across you.
Yes.
You used to have a blog called Movita Beaucoup. And if you are out there and have never read Rachael's writing, she is very funny. So
I always invite people to come and laugh at my life.
Yes, you have a lot of crap to tell people.
Yes, I really do.
That is how Rachael titles a lot of her blog posts. Crap I have been meaning to tell you. And she puts everything out there and sees the world through a very healthy sense of humor. So the first question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast, Rachael, is, did you think of yourself as creative when you were a kid?
I love this question, and I love listening to the answers that other people on your podcast have given, because it seems like everybody has a different idea of creativity. Yes. I would say I wasn't particularly creative as a child, because I think my parents saw me when I was very young that I was exceptionally shy, had a really hard time trying new things, getting out there. And so immediately they tried to enroll my siblings and I in lots of activities. I called it forced socialization. They felt like if it's not that they wanted to change who we were as people. If we were quiet kids, that was okay, but they wanted to make sure that we felt like we could say yes to opportunities as they came up, and that we wouldn't be afraid to try new things. So we took piano, and we had to be in the school band, and we were encouraged to do other activities. And so the activities I landed in were all kind of in the creative and performing arts. But when you're in those activities, when you're young, there's not a lot of room for your own creativity, because you're learning the framework, you're learning the pedagogy and the technique and how to do the things, which was fine by me. I was a people pleaser. I liked doing what I was told. So for me, ballet class was perfect, very repetitive, but not a lot of room to be creative.
No, it's not really interpretive dance, is it?
No, you can't just walk in and say, I have a full length ballet I'd like to set. But that was great for me because I didn't want to talk. I loved that I could just express myself in a different way. And it really sparked my imagination. And so when I heard music, I was creating at home. So though I wasn't particularly creative or confident enough as a child to be creative, it definitely laid the groundwork for the rest of my life, which has been, I think, very creative.
Yeah, I would agree.
But as a child, not so much.
Interesting. I've never had an answer like that. That's really interesting. And I've never thought about it from that perspective in that because my parents did something very similar. I was also very shy as a kid, and so my mom had me in, like you said, piano. Dance was the one thing she did not put me in, and that I give her a hard time about to this day. So,
come on, Mom.
But yeah, you're right. When you are in those types of programs, it is very structured. It's not creative in the way that I necessarily think of creativity, but sometimes you need that underlying structure in order for creativity to be released, if that makes sense. So
yes, I think there's an old saying, you have to know the rules before you can break the rules. And you may never break the rules. You might like the technique or the tradition, like ballet has a lot of tradition, but there are also a lot of people that are, pushing that, challenging it now, especially in recent years, because there's lots of problems in the ballet world too. So, but it does give you that freedom to kind of explore a little bit, and then you get that background, and then you can really go, in any direction you want after you have the basics. Yeah,
absolutely. So dance has been part of your life then since you were very small.
Yeah, 5 years old. So yeah, my entire life has been in the dance world, really, in some form or another.
And at what point did you think that this would be something that you wanted to teach? Did you want to be a performer, or did you always sort of feel like teaching was the way you would go?
I think I mean, certainly I loved the idea of performing, and I loved doing it myself, but I absolutely knew I wanted to be a ballet teacher. Probably, I feel like I was probably 10 or 11 years old. Yeah, I think it was because I had a really amazing role model in my ballet teacher. She was British. I lived in a very small rural community. Dance was not a thing in the 70s and 80s in the Annapolis Valley of Nova Scotia. It just wasn't. And you certainly didn't have, qualified ballet teachers. But this particular ballet teacher, Jennifer Verfaele, was married. She was from England, but had married a Canadian member of the Air Force. And so they were stationed in Greenwood, Nova Scotia, of all places, and just kismet. I ended up having this fantastically qualified and experienced ballet teacher who, I just loved her and wanted to be her. It turns out later when I was teaching, I was completely different in style to her. But I just remember from an early age being mesmerized, and she let me assist classes from a very early age. I think I was around 10 or 11. I got to be her assistant, and I loved it. I just loved it. So the idea of teaching was always, I was always enthralled with it, and knew if I could do it, I wanted to do it.
I love a good role model story.
Yeah.
I love hearing those stories. That's really amazing. And I don't know too much about the ballet world at all, but you have your qualification, your teaching qualification is from the National Ballet School, and that is like, how do you get to there? That sounds like it would be hard to get into.
It is. I mean, I don't think a lot of Canadians maybe realize what we have here in our National Ballet School. It is one of the world's top training facilities for dancers. It's an amazing school for kids who are learning to be professional dancers, but they also have this wonderful teacher training program. And I think because I'd had such good training when I was younger, and up until, I didn't go there until I was in my late 20s. I'd had such a good base that when I auditioned for the program, um, people in the ballet world sort of know how you've been trained. They can tell. And so I was very fortunate that my pedigree was such that it fit very well with the teacher training program there. And I was a mature student, which is always appealing,
Yeah.
to a teacher training program. So I auditioned and got in and moved to Toronto. And while I was there, I did certification with some other organizations, and stayed there for a couple more years after the program, just to teach in Toronto and absorb as much as I could there. So, it's definitely, I feel like most of my career has come out of those sort of options and opportunities that I've had, and that's in part, of course, because I've had those opportunities all my life, thanks to my parents. So, I always do say to people, I'm where I am because I've had some privileges that other people don't have. But I also worked really hard.
Yes,
It's not all
your
that.
own work.
But yeah, I feel very, very lucky that, and I think often in the arts world, it's timing, it's luck, it's training, you get lucky, it comes together.
It all comes together, but luck sometimes needs some manufacturing, like there's some hard work that has to go on for luck to show up.
Yes, the ballet world is all about hard work. We like hard work.
So, yeah, absolutely. You also have been writing for a very long time, and I believe your sister is actually a published author.
She is. Yes. She is. She's an award-winning author for young people. She writes for kids and young adults. So yeah, quite a role model in my own family as well.
So how did writing come into all this? Did you write as a kid, or was that something that came later?
I didn't. Yeah, it was as an adult. And I think really it was around 2007. Blogging was kind of like a new cool thing back then. Imagine that. And I liked telling stories. I think being from the Maritimes too, there's a really long history here of tall tales and also funny stories. We like that. That's what we do here. So when you grow up surrounded by these stories and comedians and singer-songwriters, it's all kind of connected. So when blogging became a thing, it just seemed like a platform where I could tell some of my own stories. I didn't tell them well. I mean, I had to practice. But I really liked writing and making people laugh. It was very appealing to me. And again, like ballet, it didn't require public speaking. You could refine it, you could edit it, you could practice it, and then you hit publish. And still, if I'm telling a story or writing a story, if I think I've made someone laugh, that's all I care about. It's just a hobby, but I really, really like it. It's just another way to express myself, I guess.
Yeah, it's always so much fun to read your work. I was sad when you stopped blogging, mostly because I was like, I want to read your funny stories.
Well, I still,
you still
on
do them.
Occasion I jump back on. I think with starting a new business, it's been really busy. But I must say, like now, I do have times where I miss it, and then that's when I'm like, okay, I should really get it back on there and tell someone something else really embarrassing that no one else would tell other people about, but I'm quite happy to do.
All for us, I know.
I'll make the sacrifice.
When I first came across your blog, I was so interested in it because I think even then I could see where the dance you were painting ballerina cake toppers. You customized them, and I was like, that is so cool. I just thought that was such a neat thing to do, and you had your gingerbread competitions, and you were always doing these really interesting things. And what I loved about those is you were encouraging other people to get creative with you, because it was like a challenge. People submitted their entries, and the prizes were,
Yeah,
prizes.
modest. There were prizes. That's the nicest thing you can say usually about it. I loved that people. I hoped that what I had created on my blog was like a really safe environment, because I had been telling people such horrendous stories about my personal life that everyone sort of felt like, oh my God, like there's nothing off limits here. If it's embarrassing, it's probably happened to her. And so people started sort of contributing either in the comments, or when they entered my gingerbread contest. Like, everyone felt like I can absolutely tell someone about that super embarrassing thing I've never told anyone else about. And now they're telling like all of my readership.
Yes.
And that they all entered these competitions knowing that I would totally make fun of everything they had created. And they would submit these entries of, just disastrous houses or really beautifully, perfectly crafted houses, but everyone was treated the same.
Yeah.
Everyone was there to share a laugh.
It was very fun I never participated, but I always enjoyed seeing the results of it. And that's one of the things that you just mentioned there, is that, the comments were often as entertaining as the blog posts that you had written.
Yeah.
And it was just a really lovely community that you had built up around your writing. So, I'm glad that you still do it from time to time. It's
I promise to do more.
But in recent years, you have gone down the path of dance photography. And tell us a little bit about your business, like when you started it and where that came from.
I don't think I'd had a camera, really, a real camera in my hand until about 10 years ago. My brother gave me his hand-me-down camera. And because I was blogging, I wanted to have pictures that I could sort of, put alongside a story, or I was blogging about food for a long time. So pictures of whatever recipe I was posting. So it was a hobby. But it never occurred to me that I could make a profession out of it. And just never ever occurred to me. And I had no formal training, so I would just YouTube, how do I do this, and how do I shoot in manual. Taught myself as much as I could, and then of course, because I was in a dance studio every day of the week, one day had my camera at the dance studio, had never taken pictures of humans before.
Very different than food.
Yeah, very different. It had never really occurred to me to sort of mix the two, even though it was such an obvious connection. Just had my camera at the studio one day, and some of my advanced dancers, and said, why don't we just take a couple of photos? Why not? Just for fun. Maybe we can use them on our social media channel. And it was like lightning struck. It, like, just as soon as I took the pictures and went home, I thought, oh, like, this is, I want to do this. I want to do this all the time. It was just, I was instantly smitten. And dance photography really wasn't a thing until recently.
No, I've been
not the way it is now.
Yes, I've been a big fan of Joe McNally for years, and he is one of the only people that and he does dance photography among other things, but he was one of the only people in North America that I had ever seen doing it. I have seen a lot of really spectacular photos come out of Cuba, and they're ballet dancers. They're basically national heroes from what I can see, and that's really the only exposure I had to it. And then when I saw what you were doing, I was like, this is brilliant. People spend so much money on their kids' grad photos and maternity shoots and all these milestones. And this is something that is like part of these young adults that you're shooting. So it came about very organically, basically.
It really did. It really did. And dance photography, before was really reserved for dance companies, professional schools. That's who was hiring dance photographers. It wasn't, a young person in Charlottetown, PEI, who was hiring a dance photographer. Yeah. But then Instagram came around and we could all see all these dancers we never had access to, and all these photographers that we had never had access to. And people started sort of catching on to this idea that I don't have to wait to be a professional dancer. Here's a photographer right here in my own city. Why don't I just mark this time in my dance journey? Or maybe it's a parent. Why don't I, instead of having this, a portrait done at a studio, why don't I have a picture of my child doing something that he or she really likes, hockey, dance, whatever it is. So Instagram has completely changed the dance photography world. It's made it a real industry now. But Halifax, of course, is very small, and we are slower to pick up on trends as many small areas are. So it's only just becoming a thing here now, like this year. Like it has not really, it's been slow to come here. But now, and I think over the past few years, I was really one of the only people doing it. There are a few people now, but there's a handful of us.
Interesting. So
yeah,
you kind of were the first to come along, I suppose, in that sense. And after you took those first few photos and you went home and you were like, okay, this is the thing. What did you do next? Did you do anything to actively pursue that, or was it still just kind of like the kids that you were teaching would come to you and say, can you take my picture, kind of thing? How did you get the idea that this could be a business?
Well, certainly at first I was just so in love with it. As a child, dance photography was my only access to the professional dance world. Like that was it.
Yeah.
Companies didn't tour in most of Canada, let alone Nova Scotia. It wasn't on TV. There was no internet. There was no YouTube. So I spent any free time I had looking at pictures of dancers. That was what I wanted to be. That's what I wanted to imagine I could be. So my dance teacher would give me old magazines, and my family would try to find dance books. And I was captivated always by dance photography. It hadn't occurred to me that I could actually pick up a camera and do it myself. It only took 20 something years to so after I had taken those first few photos and thought, oh wow, this is really fun, initially I sort of thought, oh, it's kind of a hobby, it'll be a hobby. Right. But because I had access to some really exceptional dancers, it was very easy for me to practice, to sort of say to a dancer, I'm just trying this thing out. We know each other really well. We work well together. If you're willing to pose for me, you might get a shot or two. Maybe you'll get 10. I don't know. I'm new to this. And I had all these wonderful dancers in my life. That was the benefit of having been in the dance world here for, 20 something years.
You were connected for sure.
Helps. I had lots of access to dancers who trusted me, and they knew who I was. So I just started sort of trading and saying, if you let me practice on you, I'll give you anything that I get from the session. And then as I progressed and started getting better at capturing more and understanding more about how to do it, I knew how to pose the dancers. I knew how to correct the dancers, but the photography side of things took a lot more practice. But then as I saw how much my colleagues and students were enjoying it, that's when I thought, oh yeah, like I bet a lot of people would, like this. This is a viable business. While simultaneously on Instagram, dance photography was exploding. Yeah. And so I knew just from my experience in the dance world, things are slow to come here, but it's coming. It will come here. And I'd rather be out in front. I'd rather be established when it hits than trying to catch up. Yeah. So it just really motivated me to practice and practice and practice.
And I would imagine that the fact that you are a teacher, a dance teacher, really gives you a bit of an edge, I would say, probably in this, just in the fact that you know the technical aspects of dance, which,
yes.
if I were to pick up a camera and decide that I wanted to be a dance photographer,
It can be done.
I'm sure I could take a nice picture, but
Yeah,
just I would have no idea of the technical aspects of it, or even how, because I would imagine that even helps you posing people,
absolutely.
just being able to tell them what you want them to do or things. I wouldn't be able to do something like that, and I don't think a lot of photographers out there would be able to. So that must give you a bit of a, I guess, a leg up.
Yeah, I think it does. I think if you're hiring a dance photographer who has a lot of experience in dance, you're really hiring a coach at the same time. So you're
Mm-hmm.
getting two professionals for the price of one, which I think is really important. And as someone who's worked with a lot of photographers in the dance world, um, if there's not a knowledge of dance, it becomes very difficult to get usable shots.
Right.
So it can't, even if you haven't, um, I wouldn't want to discourage someone from becoming a dance photographer. There's more than one way to get that experience. I'd say if you haven't been a dancer or a teacher, you have a lot of work to do for a dancer to trust you. But you could immerse yourself. You could study and study dance photography. You could get there. But for me right now, I don't have to do that, and I think that's a leg up. And so I think the people who hire me, they trust that I will never, I don't edit even any of the photos if their technique isn't good. I know what they're looking for. I know they won't use, no dancer will use a photo if there's bad technique. It's completely useless for us. So it doesn't matter how good the picture is technically. We're a very self-critical group of people. So yeah, I definitely think it's given me an advantage. I can help with posing. I can help correct, and I can help correct for the camera, because what we do on stage is sometimes a little different than the angles. We're trying to capture something in a picture that's like a living, moving
Yes.
entity, right? So there are little tricks. So it's not to say that if you didn't know anything about dance that you couldn't learn those things, but I do definitely think it's easier to learn about the photography side of things than the dance. I've been in the dance world for 40 something years, so it does make it easier. And I do think that trust is really important for dancers.
Yeah, you've mentioned trust multiple times since we started talking, and
Yeah,
I would imagine that is really critical in what you're
yeah.
doing in so many different ways. I could see it being critical in terms of making sure everybody's safe on the set,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yep.
but also, just having a comfort level with you. That would
Yeah.
seem like it would be very important to get the best type of I'm always very in awe of anybody who photographs people, because as somebody who hates to be photographed, it is really difficult. And I remember doing headshots for a friend once for work, and that was the one and only time I photographed people, because it was just so hard to get them
Yes.
to relax, to get them to feel comfortable, and to get anything that even remotely captured who they were. So I would imagine with dance that the whole trust factor has to be really huge with what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, at least for me, like I know if I'm in front of a camera, I feel quite vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly most dancers like to perform, hopefully. So there may be certainly a lot of the kids that I photograph, or the young women I photograph, are, they have a sort of a confidence, or they know what they want. They're pretty comfortable in their bodies. But I do sometimes photograph dancers who are a little more reserved. So that's a little more work, trying to get the best out of them. But I think, again, having taught for almost 30 years, I've seen all those different personality
Yeah.
types in my studio. So you kind of, you start knowing how to talk to those kids, and how to ease into certain movements or poses. But there definitely has to be a trust, because if someone thinks you're going to take a picture of them that isn't flattering or doesn't make them look their best and then post it on your own Instagram, like I would never have another client. So I'm very, very particular, and I always want to be very reassuring to parents too, because if you're working with younger people, there has to be a trust there as well. They're children. So how you're posing children, what you're emphasizing in your photographs is really, really important. And you definitely don't want to highlight certain parts of a child's body. So how you pose them, what you cover, checking what they're wearing. And there are certainly unethical photographers out there who don't pay attention to that. It's become very, there's a real awareness in dance photography now about those dangers as well. It's rare, statistically, but you have to watch out for all that stuff. So the more trust you can establish for the family and from the dancer, from your colleagues, if they're going to use you, the better. And that's the same in any industry, really, to be an ethical person, to, and to honor your client.
Yeah, that catches up with you eventually if you're not. So.
Yes. Yeah, but usually publicly.
Yes. But you've even niched down further than that. Like, you actually don't photograph very young children. You do have an age limit where you, and I think it's 12 that you're sort of 12 and up. So that is that was interesting to me as well, because that really is niching. I would imagine there probably are a lot of parents of 5 and 6-year-old dancers out there who would love to have their kids' photos taken.
Yes, I've definitely limited my earning potential. I felt, as I started, at first it was a decision because I thought, as I'm learning this craft, this skill, it's easier for me when I can talk one-on-one with a dancer who has lots of experience. Sure. So I don't have to explain how to do the step. They know that. I can correct it and fine-tune it. But, they know what they're doing, dance-wise. But then as I started photographing more and more of these dancers who are in their teen years or young adults, the more uncomfortable I got with the idea of pictures of 6-year-olds sitting beside pictures of 26-year-olds. And that's not to say lots of photographers do that, and their photos are great and their portfolios are wonderful. It just kind of was a funny feeling for me. I think it comes from being an overprotective dance teacher. There's a lot of conversation now in the dance world about the sexualization of children, and costumes. And I just think a 25-year-old woman, she's just going to photograph differently. So right now I just sort of feel like, that age 12, they know who they are. We can have honest discussions during a session. Like, let's not pose you that way. That's showing something I don't want to show, and I don't have to explain it. And I just feel it just suits my style a little bit more. I do offer sessions sometimes, a few for like 10 and 11-year-olds, but I think that's about as young as I'm going to go. But it does. It certainly limits things. And I do admire people who shoot younger children, because that's a whole other skill set. Posing them appropriately. And they're kids. They're little. They're wiggly and squirmy. And
they are. They
so I don't yet possess.
Do you ever worry that getting super specific, and you sort of hinted at this, it potentially limits your income, or have you found that niching down actually has given you more earning opportunities because you can be so focused on what you do and you can be the best at what you do, type of thing?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. Certainly, I think if I were open to photographing younger dancers, I'm sure I would probably triple my income. I have no doubt. There's a huge market for it, but I'm very fussy also about just how I work. So I've been the same in the dance studio. I'm very particular. I like things done properly, and so definitely think it has limited my income to a certain degree, but also I think when my potential clients who are 12 and up come to look at my portfolio, I think they also see and I hope appreciate what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
that I am very particular. So I think the people who are coming to me are saying, yeah, like she's pretty serious about about posing, and I don't see anyone here with bad technique. And I shoot dancers of lots of different levels and backgrounds. It's my job to make them all look like the most amazing dancer that they can. So I think niching down in that way has been really beneficial, because I think it's helped me sort of solidify a reputation in in that kind of very specific area. So no, I don't shoot a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, but if you have a 14-year-old, I can probably make her look pretty good.
When you're setting up, I'm just thinking of all the photos of yours that I've seen. How do you come up with the idea for the locations? And then, because you have some really interesting locations, and I don't want you to necessarily give away your location secrets or anything like that, but do your dancers come to you and say, I'd really like to do something here? Or do you kind of like, how collaborative is it when you're setting up and
I
getting
always
ready?
I hope it's collaborative all the time. Mostly I have Nova Scotia to thank.
You do, you live in a
Thank you,
beautiful
Nova
part of the world.
Scotia. We have, countryside, we have ocean, we have rugged ocean, we have beaches, city, we have everything all within a short drive. So when someone books a shoot with me, I leave the location up to that dancer, but probably, you know, 70% of them come back to me and say, I don't know I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. So I have a list of places that I recommend. Um, I love it if they pick their own location, because I think they've probably chosen a place that's meaningful to them,
Mm.
which to me means those photos will be more significant to them down the road. But because I do have a list of places that I've used I know are successful, I'm always happy to give that to them. And so I just sort of ask them, well, what kind of mood, what kind of look are you going for? Do you want it to be something that reminds you of the sea? Do you want something that's a little bit more urban, a little more edgy? And we kind of go from there. I try to find locations where there aren't tons of people, because I don't want them in my shots. I want the dancer to be the focus. And also, there's nothing like a tourist in a
Yeah.
Speedo, eating a hot dog, right? It's not the look that a lot of the dancers are going for.
No, no.
But sometimes in an urban shot, like we'll have
Yeah,
people, and because it's a cityscape.
yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a bit of both. And I give them a list of ideas, at least to get them started. But Nova Scotia certainly is the canvas that keeps on giving.
Yeah, if you're listening, I definitely recommend you go check out Rachel's website and see some of her photos, or her Instagram. She has some really spectacular dance photos. I'll leave links to all of that in the show notes. I've always really enjoyed seeing how effortlessly it sort of goes from like a really urban shot to something really outdoorsy, or that's picking up on the natural scenery that Nova Scotia is very blessed
Mm-hmm.
with. Yeah, so I've always wondered like how collaborative that is, if it's something
Yeah,
the
there's a
dancer.
lot of scrambling over rocks.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm with dancers and I have to hold them back and say, I don't think you can make it over to that cliff. Maybe let's take the shot somewhere else. I have some very brave dancers. So yeah, we scramble around, and usually we try to pick a location where we can move around and get a lot of different shots, and we'll change outfits throughout, because my hope is that you can come to a 2-hour shoot, but it might look like we've actually done 3 shoots together.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, we not pictured always in those pictures as us climbing over boulders and walking through Nova Scotia's brush and prickles, and to get those shots, but dancers are pretty adventurous, so
Yeah, with not having a formal photography background, I mean, you have a very formal dance background,
yeah.
but from a photography perspective, you're self-taught. Um, Do you ever, we talk about imposter syndrome and mindset stuff on this podcast a lot. Is that something you ever struggle with? Like, who am I to be taking these photos? Or do you ever look at your work and wonder, you know what I'm getting at here, but
I do. It's crippling. It's every day of my existence right now. It's been a challenge. I embrace it though, because being from the dance world, I mean, we have imposter syndrome all the time. I've gone from one set of insecurities to another. But no, yeah, I think having no formal training, for some reason, constantly in my head, if I think another photographer is looking at my work, I assume that photographer is questioning everything I have done. Why is she using those settings, and why is she editing that? And that's not how we do it, which is interesting to me because I don't do that when I'm looking at another photographer's work. So why I assume
they're probably not. No.
Yeah. So it's the ridiculousness of these insecurities is, I think of it all the time. It doesn't mean I don't have them. And I think coming from a very formal training in the dance world, where your training is everything, and the more expertise and qualifications you have, the better, to now be transitioning into a career where weekly I say, I wonder if I could learn how to do that on YouTube. It's not the National Ballet School, So it has led to this really weird sort of challenge to what I have known as how you train properly for a career.
Yeah.
And how I've taught people to train correctly for a career. So I've definitely in the past year, especially with the pandemic, where I've had more time off, I couldn't teach. Studios were shut down. So I had a lot more time sort of devote to learning about photography and thinking about where I want my business to go. I've really tried to start having conversations with myself about not being so critical, first of all, to sort of say, you wouldn't let any of your students or colleagues or friends talk to themselves this way. So, why are you bullying yourself? What would you say if a colleague had these doubts? And so I've been trying, you and I have been talking about talking to ourselves. Yes. And I have this internal dialogue where I'm saying, you're getting better all of the time, and you're doing a good job, and your clients are booking with you because they like what they see.
Yeah.
Why you're worried about this invisible person, who doesn't really exist, is so silly. It doesn't make it any easier.
No, and it's so. I don't know a single creative who doesn't deal with this, and it's such a. I don't know where it comes from. I'm sure that there's some psychologists out there or people who could explain it to us, but I'm always so floored that we're always our own harshest critic. We would never allow other people to talk about themselves in the way that we talk about ourselves internally, and yet there it is. We do it.
Yeah,
we do it.
I call it self-bullying. Yep. that and my dancers do it all the time, and I don't like it in the dance studio when I'm there. And I think just probably in the past few weeks, as I'm heading into a new photography season, I've also started sort of acknowledging that, at least for me, some of my imposter syndrome isn't actually imposter syndrome, it's jealousy. So I'll see someone doing really well, and jealousy is this word that no one kind of likes, and I don't find a lot of people talk about it. But it's actually can be kind of motivating. So sometimes I try to say, look, are you feeling like you're not good enough, or you just sort of have a healthy jealousy of how what this person is doing? And I try to acknowledge that and sort of say, oh yeah, like I'm not gonna, I don't want this person to be unsuccessful. I'm gonna take that that sort of envy and motivate myself with it. And I don't know, I do sometimes think, there's that little element of that as well, which is uncomfortable, I think.
Yeah, jealousy.
You don't want to think that you don't want to think you're that person, that jealous person. But I think, sometimes I think I am maybe a little bit jealous of that other photographer. What do I do with that?
Jealousy would be a good podcast episode. I'm going to make a note of that,
Yeah.
because you're right. We don't talk about that. And,
We don't.
And it is there. And I think you're absolutely right. No one wants to admit. I mean, jealousy is like an ugly quality,
It's
right?
ugly. Yeah.
And nobody wants to admit that they have it. But I think there are parts of imposter syndrome that are very rooted in jealousy. And I think often that's where a lot of conflict in creative industries come from. It's based on feeling jealous from what somebody else is doing or achieving, or I think even sometimes on Instagram when I mute somebody because seeing their work upsets me, and if I really think about it, it's like, it's not because the work is bad, it's not because they're a bad person, it's because I'm jealous that I didn't create that.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's an uncomfortable feeling, but
It is. It's very comfortable. And I have always said, as a creator and someone in the performing arts, I've always said there's room for everyone. And in the ballet world, there's been a real reckoning with that. It turns out the ballet world, for years, a lot of people are just sort of cluing into the fact that it's pretty racist, and there hasn't been room for everyone. And so recently I've been feeling like, I've been saying all of the right things. There's room for everyone. There are enough clients for everyone. So if I really believe that, I also have to support other photographers and not be jealous.
Yeah.
And it's interesting doing that here in Halifax. I feel like both the dance community and the photography community are quite competitive. And a few weeks ago, another dance photographer in the city had a promotion going on, and I posted it on my own Instagram in my stories for my followers to see, and connected with her and sort of said, like, we should be chatting. We're both dance photographers, and we had a lovely chat. And a male photographer who I don't know specifically took the time to get in touch with me to tell me that it was a huge mistake to promote another photographer's work. And I thought, oh, there it is. There it is. And here's this fellow who knows nothing about dance, knows nothing about me, knows nothing about this other photographer, but he felt the need to step in and tell me that I shouldn't be, that this was not the way to sort of run a business. And I thought, wow, like, this is a problem. This is a problem. A client who's going to book with me wasn't going to book with that other photographer, and vice versa. They're going to see something about you that appeals to them, that resonates with them. There is room for everyone. So I find now with my crippling imposter syndrome, I've been trying to get over it by being more confident that people will come, that if I keep my head down and do the work and trust that, I'm getting better at it every day, that things are going to happen, and that supporting someone else doesn't take away from my success. And I think that's been helping, because once I identified that there was a lot of jealousy happening there, I thought the only way for me to get past jealousy is to help other people out.
Yeah, that's
it's the only way it's going to work for me.
It is. And in some ways, the fact that you promoted another dance photographer on your social media, there's a little bit of bravery going on there.
It's complete insanity.
No, but it's not. When you think about it, I mean, I think most of us wouldn't be that brave. There's a lot of us who'd be like, oh, I really like her work, or they know her and she's a really nice person. But we would all have that moment of fear where we'd be like, if I put her out there on my social channels, am I going to lose clients to her? Even though, like you said, a client is going to book with the person whose style resonates with them the most, who they gel with the most. It's so many things that, and I always liken it to buying a car. There's hundreds of car models out there, and we don't all want the same one, right? And that's fine.
Yes. And yet there are tons of cars out there. None of the companies.
No, nobody's.
Very few of them have stopped producing cars.
That's right.
It's something that, again, I think maybe because of the pandemic, and I've spent more time on social media just enjoying other people's work. I did sort of feel like, I couldn't just say I was going to support other women. I had to do it.
Yeah.
I guess I honestly, like, the next week when I had a promo on, she immediately shared it on her social media as well.
Yeah.
And, and I thought, now, why can't we do that for each other? There are thousands of dancers, even here in Nova Scotia. There's enough work for everyone. So why not? And there's got to be people who follow me. I always think there are dancers who maybe would like to have a photo shoot, but maybe my style doesn't work for them. So why not help them find something that will suit them? I think that's part of being a good, like, community member.
Yeah.
It could be a huge mistake. Certainly this fellow who got in touch with me thought it was just a terrible move. And I sort of get it. I thought it was interesting that he took the time to tell me what I was doing.
Yeah, that's interesting to me too.
I was like, that. I don't think another woman would have done that. That was an interesting dynamic. But and so maybe he'll be right, but I don't think so. I think if you can be generous, it comes back.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I fully believe, too, that there is enough work for everyone. I think this is one of the most dangerous mindsets in the creative industry, is thinking that that there's this scarcity model, it's just, it doesn't exist. And if you feel that you're not getting the work, then you probably need to have a good look at what you're doing. But yes, I do truly believe that there is work out there for everyone. I believe that there are groups out there who need a leg up.
Yes.
And who need people who are in a position to give that leg up to do that. And I think that's something that we all need to be doing more of. So yeah, jealousy is a very interesting conversation to have. I'm definitely going to put that in my podcast.
Oh, good.
Episode list.
I will look forward to that episode.
Because I think that's it's definitely something that I deal with, and I hate admitting it, putting it out there right now. Yeah. But I do catch myself doing it, and it's like, no,
I feel like a real creep.
You do, because it's one of these traits that just makes you look like not a very good person, and yet. And there it is. I think it's a very human emotion. I mean, we all experience it at some point. So, yeah. But I love that you shared that other photographer's promotions, and I love that she shared back like that. It
was sort of instant gratification. Like, it instantly, as soon as I shared it, it started a conversation, and we joked that a lot of people wouldn't do that that people seem to think that they should be at each other's throats and destroy each other. And I sort of feel like now there's someone else out there also that, like, in the dance photography world in Halifax, there are like 4 of us. So who do you talk to, and who do who inspires you to have some friends out there? I just don't think it's ever a bad thing.
No, it's not. It's always nice to have that group of people who get what you do and who you can have those conversations with, particularly as a business owner, where, and in a field like photography, where you are pricing services, which is so difficult. It's just any field where you have to, pricing in general, whether it's products or services, is just... God, I've been self-employed for over a decade, and I still struggle with pricing, like, all the time. And so just being able to have somebody to have those conversations with, and just talk about, like, the challenges of what you're doing and where you're doing it is such a relief sometimes. And one day we'll all be able to go for coffee and have those conversations in real life. Do you ever get asked to take on other types of photography, like weddings? I always find that when people think you're a decent photographer, they're like, "Oh, I have a wedding coming up. Can you shoot it for me?" And I just think that's hilarious. But
it is. It's very funny to me, especially because there are no other photos in my portfolio or feeds other than dancers. So yeah, I definitely, weddings are the thing I get asked to do the most.
Yeah.
Sometimes other, parties or children. A woman asked me to do her husband's professional headshots. um, I get. I think first and foremost, I'm always flattered, because to think that somebody has seen something in my work that then makes them want to see that in their wedding photographs is exceptionally flattering. And it's also often someone who maybe I know, maybe I've taught them, or we've known each other through the dance world. So I think how like special it is they actually want me at that event. That
Yeah.
they're sharing that with me. So that's very, very flattering. But I always say no, and because it's not what I do. So usually I just explain to people that they're very different skill sets.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm working with a dancer. We take a lot of time refining a pose and correcting. We can take 30 shots if we want. We can do it over and over again. Your grandmother at your wedding, passing you something, or you cutting the cake, that's an instantaneous moment. You have to be very skilled at anticipating and capturing those moments. That's not what I do.
Yeah.
And I often compare it to, if you were, looking for someone to coach the Raptors, you're not going to ask the head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Even though their jobs look similar, they're very different things. Yes, they both coach professional teams, but do you want that guy coaching the Raptors through the playoffs? Probably not. You probably want someone with experience in the NBA. And to me, it's that kind of it's the same sort of thing. But it is very flattering. At the same time, every time someone asks me that, I think, I clutch my pearls. Like, oh, how sweet that they would think of me. But yeah, I tell them it would be a huge mistake. You would really regret it if you hired me.
It is, and it's just it's really just meant as a they love your work, and they just want somebody who produces that caliber of work to capture their perfect moment. It really is a huge compliment when that happens. So,
and I have a huge list now of people who I've met through the photography world that I can recommend. At different price points, and sort of say, I don't know what you're looking for, but take a look at these portfolios. Here's some really amazing people that I've met who I think you would enjoy having at your wedding, and who do a really good job. So it's just another way to sort of promote someone else. Which is always nice. It's not a job that I could do or want to do. So why not, give it a list of other businesses?
Absolutely. From a business perspective, when you are in such a specific niche, do you actually find that is helpful to you from like a marketing perspective? I would imagine that it would be, just from my experience, but does it really help you get a handle on who your customer is, who your competition is, and how to get the word out about what you do?
I definitely think it's probably easier for me to market my business because it is so specific. I've spent my entire life in the dance world, so I always feel like I know what we like. I know what the trends are. So I hope that what I do is very obvious to anyone who's coming to my Instagram feed or to my website. So that helps. I don't think that it's ambiguous at all. They know what I'm doing. And then hopefully, because I feel like as a dancer, I know what's kind of eye-catching, or like I say, what the trends are. That's what I can focus on. That's what I focus on putting into my feed, or showcasing on my website. And then, I've been very, very lucky, because I do work almost exclusively with women, and women do have a way of sort of spreading the word. I've had a lot of moms who, they just tell everyone they know about me, which is so incredibly generous, but that's what they do. And a lot of my colleagues have told everyone about me. So I've been very lucky. I haven't done a lot of really specific marketing. It's sort of been organic. I probably should, but being this sort of self run empire. I don't know a lot about marketing, so I'm just starting now to sort of think, gee, maybe I should start paying for advertising on places like Instagram. But I think even there, it's pretty easy to know who I'm targeting. I have a very specific age group.
Yeah.
It is. I think it's much easier than if I were shooting a really wide range, or if I were a commercial photographer who's shooting, beer and cars, and then I don't know how I would even begin to target my audience.
I'm always curious about photographers who sort of do the full life cycle, like they do the weddings, the maternity shoots, the newborn shoots, the family shoots, and it's a lot. And I'm always curious, like, how do you market that? How do you know what to focus on when you're looking for a new client? Because I imagine that if all you do is shoot weddings, hopefully you don't have a lot of return clients. So, how do you see those people again? So I can see where that might come into play. But I would think with dance that, especially if you're starting with people who are younger, and as they grow through their training and potentially even to a professional career, you will have the opportunity to work with them multiple times, especially if you've built up that trust level with them.
I do. I have some who's dancers who now it's become a yearly thing, which is so fun to watch and then look back at their older photos. And I do try to make a photo shoot an experience, because coming from a small place where dance photography wasn't a thing, and those pictures were my only access to the world of dance, I always try to bring that to my shoot. Like, I imagine this is a dancer who may not have a professional career, but why not make that person feel like they are that principal dancer with New York City Ballet for one afternoon or one evening. So I try to make it an experience, which then I hope then they're more likely to share with other people. And so, I don't have like a lot of branded marketing materials, but every dancer who does a shoot with me, I paint a topper, a little vintage ballerina topper for her. So they all get them, or I make them into little ornaments that I give them with their USB of photos. One year, when I had fewer clients, I was just starting my first year, 2019, I painted a little topper to match whatever that person wore in their photo shoot. So they all had a little match. I couldn't do that now. It would be very time consuming. But, I think sometimes marketing also is just that those little things that you do maybe during your session. Yeah. And I think that applies to pretty much any business. You order something on Etsy and like you get a little surprise that someone's included with your order, right? And you just remember that person. So I think if you can make it a good experience, that really helps. And then you get those return clients.
Yeah, that must be quite rewarding. Do you think being in a specific niche, does that give you an advantage with pricing? Are you able to charge a little more than maybe if you did all the things? Or do you think I don't know your niche in terms of pricing or anything like that. Do you feel boxed in a way, I guess?
I think sometimes, many women or business people have a hard time with pricing what they're valued at. And a salon owner who has been cutting my hair, Fred Connors, here in Halifax since 1992, yells at me regularly so that I'm not charging enough and you have to value yourself, and this is how being an entrepreneur works. So this year I raised my prices a little reluctantly. I tend to, because I've been in the dance studio world here in Halifax for a long time. I feel like I know what the comfort level of families is in terms of expenditures. Ballet is expensive, lessons are expensive, outfits and point shoes and everything else. So I try to keep my prices reasonable while at the same time, paying myself. But because it's very niche, it's not too hard to find out what everybody else is pricing. A lot more dance photographers are being transparent about their pricing. Mine's on my website. I know some photographers think that's a mistake. They think you shouldn't, for some reason, put your prices out. But I do, and a lot of other photographers do. So I feel that my pricing is very competitive as a result. I try not to sort of undervalue myself, but also because dance photography is so new in the city, I want to make it affordable. So what I've done, my strategy has been to offer many different price points. So shorter sessions with fewer photos, and so you can buy a much more reasonably priced session, which might be because you feel that you shouldn't or can't afford to spend more money, but it also might be because it's your first shoot and you're a little bit worried. So maybe an hour-long shoot is more than enough for you to get comfortable. And then I offer 3-hour shoots for, a much higher price for someone who can afford to do that or wants to invest in that way. So for me, that's sort of been how I've been dealing with it. But in my niche, I do think it's quite easy to find out what everyone is charging. So I have done a lot of research, and I've tried to keep mine reasonably priced.
I think tiered pricing is really smart too when you're in a creative service, and I try to do that with my design services too. And it just gives people know the minimum investment, but there's always that, what do they call, like the platinum package, right? And not everybody's most people are not going to want that, but every now and then somebody does. And
yeah.
And if you hadn't offered that, nobody would have ever bought it. So it's a good way to look at it, I think. You are retiring from teaching.
I am.
Yes. And so is the photography going to take over as your full-time income or your full-time gig?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I think the pandemic, boy, it's hard to find positives in the pandemic, but I've managed to do it. I was laid off teaching last March, of course. Everything shut down. And so it was actually really good timing because I had been thinking about leaving. I'd had some injuries, just sort of feeling like when I was teaching, I was getting that feeling that I would rather be taking photographs. Right. So I was realizing that all of a sudden I wanted to be doing something more than teaching, which had never really happened before. And I was laid off during the pandemic. My body, I felt better than I had in years. So I thought, so this is what it's like to kind of have a pain-free body. And it just seemed like a really great time to see what my life would be like with no teaching, and would I be okay with that? And it turned out that I was, and because Nova Scotia's had very few cases of COVID, I was able to do all my photography pretty much last year. It didn't have as much impact. We were certainly locked down until the early summer, but then it meant I could do my entire outdoor photography season, and we had very few restrictions here. So then I got to experience what would my life be like with no teaching and only photography, and it turned out I really liked it.
Felt good.
So I thought I would give it a try. I have a fallback. I think that's important if you're launching yourself into something new. If you have a backup plan, my teaching career is established here, so I can always go back to it. But I feel like it's a really good time. I feel like I've been picking up, there's been a lot of momentum now, and dance photography certainly is becoming a thing here finally in Halifax. So and I get so excited about shooting. I thought, why not do this all the time?
Your work is fantastic. I love looking at it. I love dance photography. There's just something about capturing the human body in motion. I don't know. I've always been fascinated by it. Concert photography is something I've always wished I could do, which I think that's very similar to. It's just catching people in that moment of performance, and I love it. It brings it to life on a page, and that's really special, and you do a great job of it. So I really hope that this goes well for you. I think it will. You've got I think just the fact that you are so established in the dance community in Nova Scotia, I think that even if you did have to go back to your backup plan, you might not even necessarily have to go back to teaching. I think there would be so many things you could do within that community. So that's always a nice thing to know that that's behind you. So
I think that's the benefit too. I can only speak to dance photography, but this idea of niching down, usually people are niching because it's something they're really passionate about. you're not going to get exclusively into, automotive photography if you aren't passionate about cars. So to niche down means that when you're doing whatever it is that you've chosen, that hopefully it's really exciting to you, and you have an inherent sort of knowledge of what's going to work and what isn't, because you consume that. It's such a big part of your life. So I do think, there are some risks, certainly, maybe limitations if you're going to niche down. But I think if anyone's thinking about, doing it, it can be an awfully great way to spend your days.
I think so. And I think when you niche down to that point, you become the go-to person. You become the expert at it, and the person that people recommend and suggest is like, oh, you want to get photos? Well, you need to talk to this person. She's the one who does the best work, or things like that. And I've seen it in food. I've seen it in design. The people who niche down become the experts in their field. They become the people that are asked to speak at events. They're the people who are asked to come do specific things. And I just think, I also think too, I don't know about you, but I create so much better when I have restrictions on me. Like,
yes.
The worst thing a design client can say to me is like, oh, I'm open to anything. It's like, oh no.
Yeah. And I will procrastinate. So
yes,
I always think if I were crazy enough to shoot someone's wedding, I would never want to edit the photos. It would be a chore. So I think if you've niched down, like, it probably more aspects of that business are more exciting to you. So you're going to be more willing to do the work, and you're more engaged. And I have a friend who, she always says, you want to be the person leading, setting the trends.
Yes.
You want to be out ahead. So she always tells me, she's not a photographer, but she always says, you're the first photographer doing what you're doing here. So make everybody else chase you.
Yeah.
Make them catch up to you. And then when they think they've caught up to you, do something else that's really neat and exciting. And I always think that was such great advice, to anticipate, or maybe as soon as everybody's doing the same thing, you swerve and go a different way. But I think you can only do that if you have expertise or a passion for your work, right?
This is
that is exciting.
The things with, you see this quite often, and as a photographer, I don't know if you've experienced it yet, but if you haven't, I am sure that you will at some point, is, people copying your work or outright stealing your work and doing these things.
Yes.
And I see this very often in our food blogging community, people just freaking out because somebody is using their recipes or their photos or something somewhere. And I get it. It's illegal. They shouldn't be doing it 100%. But at the same time, I think we often forget that, you know what? We're the creative ones. People have to copy us. That's the only way they feel they can get ahead, is to copy what we're doing. They're never going to be able to think independently of how to take the next step. So, as long as you are constantly creating and improving and, like you said, pushing the envelope, nobody can catch you because they don't have your brain. It's that creative brain that we have inside that's our superpower, and nobody else has one like yours. So make the most of it.
Yes, whenever somebody says, so they stole my picture or whatever, I always say, welcome to the internet. Like, exactly. Get used to it. It doesn't make it right.
No.
But be flattered. Unless they're making a ton of money off of your stolen work, in which case you have a legal case. Move on. It's someone who's never going to create or...
No, they're never
it's not going to happen for them. It's just someone who's just mimicking or in some strange way admire what you're doing. So I just sort of think, oh, that's nice. Somebody liked my work enough to steal it.
Yep. That's exactly how I feel about it.
I'm not going to pay a lawyer to go after this person. And
no, if it was Nike, I'd probably go after them. But
they can afford to pay me for my photo. I do think ideally you can be inspired by other people. Certainly I pull inspiration from other dance photographers or dancers, but if you can take all of that and keep your your genre, your whatever area of entrepreneurship you're in. If you can keep moving that forward, it's going to benefit everyone anyway.
Yeah.
Make them catch up to you.
Absolutely.
That's the competitive side of me.
I know I'm not particularly competitive, but that's where it does come out. Is like, okay,
yes.
You know what? You're going to do what I'm doing. I'm going to go do something else.
Yeah. Take that.
Yes, you person, you. Rachel, thank you so much for being on the podcast this week. It was such a pleasure to talk to you. Where can people find you on the internets?
They can find me on the internets, on Instagram. I'm Movita Beaucoup Dance, and my website, movitabeaucoup.com. If you can't spell that, I'm sure Melissa will have it linked. But
yes.
I'm everywhere, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about myself for a very long time. But I appreciate the opportunity to talk about niching down. I hope lots of people will consider it.
Yes, I hope so too. And I hope everybody enjoyed getting to know you as one of our creative Canadian women on the show. And as Rachel said, I actually almost just called you Movita Beaucoup right there.
I respond to anything.
As Rachel said, we will put all the links to her social media and to her website in the show notes so that you can go check her out. But please do go have a look at her photography. It is really beautiful. Yes, and thank you so much for being here this week.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's it for this week. We will be back again next week with a brand new episode. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining us for the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. If you're looking for links or resources mentioned in this episode, you can find detailed show notes on our website at andshелookedup.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter for more business tips, profiles of inspiring Canadian creative women, and so much more. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the show via your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. We always love to hear from you, so we'd love it if you'd leave us a review through iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Drop us a note via our website at andshелookedup.com or come say hi on Instagram at andshелookedup. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.